Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 55, where we are talking about a game about the strangest battle of World War II, Castle Itter from DVG Games. And we will get to that review in just a minute, but before we do, we are going to start this episode like we always do with the news. And the news comes to us once again from tablefor1.me. If you have not checked out this website, this is a great place to go and learn more about the latest solo games news and check out reviews of games, and just a wonderful resource for people who like to play solo games. So you can check that out online at tablefor1.me. And our first bit of news this week is that PAX Premier 2nd Edition is getting a second print run. This is a game from publisher Whirligig Games and designer Cole Wehrle, which is the guy who designed Root. This is a very different design from Root. It is a game about colonizing Afghanistan. Looks to be like a pretty heady kind of war game.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks more abstract than I expected.
Yeah, abstract and beautiful.
Yeah, very, very pretty.
In a way that war games often are not. Like, it has a cool cloth map and resin markers to show, I guess, influence and that sort of thing. Oof, it looks fantastic. It's expensive. It'll set you back like $70 or so on the Kickstarter, but it looks like the pieces are elegant.
Yeah.
And definitely worth the price, I think. So, if you're interested in that, the Kickstarter has actually ended, but I assume that there will be late pledges available for this because most Kickstarters usually do. So you can check that out, and that is PAX Premier 2nd Edition from Whirligig Games. Our second bit of news for this week is a new game called Starlight, which has come to Kickstarter. This is a game for 1 to 4 players, and it just caught my eye because it has pretty vibrant, eye-catching art, I think. And it's a game that I hadn't heard a whole lot about before it went on Kickstarter, and it's already up to like $350,000. And that doesn't often happen. Usually you can kind of call the games that are going to be attractive to a lot of people. This is a game where you play a new pilot who has, I guess, just gotten his own spaceship or something, and suddenly you are attacked by some kind of alien race. And now you seek refuge on a larger spaceship that's exploring and looking for answers about the aliens that have attacked your fleet. What's interesting to me about this game is that most bigger space games like this don't include a solo variant. I assume that must be part of what's intriguing to people. It's not quite a 4X game.
Right. Doesn't seem that way.
But it has bright, vivid, colorful artwork, and I assume exploring and also testing your skills as a pilot. That's not a typical combination for these kind of games. Looks really neat. So if you're interested in a game like that, you can check it out on Kickstarter right now. That is Starlight. Our third bit of news for this week is that Garphill Games, who have famously made Paladins of the West Kingdom and Architects of the West Kingdom and Raiders of the North Sea, they are trying to help out folks who are stuck at home during this COVID quarantine thing, and they have released a free print and play mini expansion for Raiders, since that is their most popular game, and it supports solo play, which is pretty cool. It doesn't look very involved. I mean, it's really just a handful of cards. It's called The Crew. But you can go to Garphill Games' website and check that out. I mean, if you like the game, there's no reason not to go and grab it.
Right.
So check that out when you get a chance. That is the Crew expansion from Raiders of the North Sea from Garphill Games. And really, this last bit of news is just kind of a general announcement to make you aware that a lot of companies are trying to help out while people are stuck at home. If you are bored and looking for a new game to play, but you don't really have a lot of money, or you've lost your job or had your hours cut, you can go and check out Board and Dice is releasing several of their games in a print and play version over the next month or so. Smallbox Games is doing the same thing. Osprey Games is actually giving away their Frosthaven series, or system, I guess. You can get the core rulebook plus 2 solo-friendly supplements, all for free. It's just really neat. So if you're interested in checking out some of these games that maybe you've had your eye on for a while, several publishers are giving them away for free. So you can check out those publishers' websites, or you can go and look on Board Game Geek for lists of those companies that are doing things like this. All right, that's all the news we've got for this week. So we are going to move into the review, and the review is sponsored once again by Stone Valley Games. Stone Valley Games is an online shop where you can buy board games and RPG supplies, and they have a special emphasis on solo games. So they started supporting us a few months back, and they've been wonderful partners for us. Eric and Wendy, who started this business, are so friendly. They ship everything out quickly, they pack it well, and they carry good stuff. And actually, just recently, they've made some big partnerships. They're now able to carry Asmodee games, for instance. They're a retail partner for them. So they are now stocking quite a few more games than they had been before. If you have not checked them out, you really should. Their prices are good. They have a good loyalty program. And if you like this show and what we're doing, part of this is made possible because of them. Several of the games that we have reviewed recently and several of the games that we have coming up have all come from them. So we're very thankful for them and their support. So check them out when you get a chance. That is stonevalleygames.com. Okay, the review for this week is for Castle Itter. Castle Itter comes to us from designer David Thompson and publisher DVG Games, and it plays 1 to 2 players in about 45 to 60 minutes. It is a war game, and it is a game about the strangest battle of World War II. Castle Itter is based on an actual real historical event, a battle that was fought at a castle near the Austrian village of Itter on May 5th, 1945, in the last days of World War II in Europe. In this battle, U.S. forces joined with Wehrmacht infantrymen, an SS officer, an Austrian resistance fighter, and recently freed French POWs, which is a pretty eclectic mix, to say the least, in order to defend the castle against an attacking force from the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division. So this battle is interesting because I believe this is the only time in World War II that German soldiers and Allied forces fought side by side against other German forces. So pretty fascinating context. And in this game, you take on the role of that force of people who defended the castle for 12 hours on that day. If you can last until the deck of SS invaders is depleted without letting them reach the castle, then you win the game. But you probably won't.
Right.
I think just right off the bat, it's worth saying here, we don't typically review war games. This is not the sort of thing that we're generally drawn to. I've played a few. I've played Churchill from GMT Games, and I've played a coin game, Fire in the Lake, which was way too much for me, and I did not enjoy it at all. I know it's supposed to be really good. It's just, and I've played and loved Twilight Struggle for years, but that's pretty much my exposure.
Yeah, I really don't have any.
Yeah. I mean, you played Twilight Struggle with me that one time, right?
Yeah. I won because I caused you to...
Yeah, I hosted the Olympics. You made me host the Olympics. And then we engaged in nuclear war after that.
Right. Yeah.
So I do really love Twilight Struggle, but for me and for a lot of people, I think that's about as far into war games as we're willing to go. Pretty intimidated by them as a rule. And even though I do enjoy learning about history, I just don't want to have to muddle through 40 pages of rules to get there. So one of the things that you all asked for recently was that we try to cover a solitaire war game at some point. And you made several suggestions, and many of them were interesting, and probably some of them we'll follow up on in the future. But this is one that stuck out. Some folks just suggested that we try a game from DVG because they're a little bit more approachable. And we'll get into this in a bit, but I would say that is definitely the case. But I want to put this out up front because this is not the kind of game we typically review or are drawn to. So just know that as we start the review, I guess. It's good to know that going in if you're new. So let's talk about components for the game, because this is definitely one of those areas where if you are a war gamer and you look at the components for this game, you're going to have a very different perspective compared to somebody who's a typical board gamer.
Yeah. My impression, at least from what I've seen, is in the war game realm, these components are all perfectly fine and whatever. I mean, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say so. In fact, I would say in some ways they're lavish.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, with war games, you can't always count on getting a mounted board.
Right.
Right. Like some of these games, I don't think it's as frequent anymore. GMT has really stepped up their production, and they're one of the main war game producers. Usually you're getting a mounted board with them, I think, maybe all the time now. But it certainly wasn't the case even a few years ago that you could count on getting a mounted board. You do get one in this game, and quite a nice one.
I think. The board is well done.
Yeah, it's kind of longer and skinnier than I'm used to, but actually it works out really well for fitting on my table nicely. It is very clear what everything means and does, and I think it looks nice on the table. Good thickness and all of that. The cards are lower quality than what I'm used to. The cardboard tokens are maybe standard thickness, but they don't have like any kind of nice linen finish on them or anything like that. Some of them are printed kind of off center, So not standard quality, or maybe I should just say not the kind of high quality we typically expect with board games nowadays.
Right.
That has become the new standard. It comes with a few standard D6s like white with black pips that are kind of scratched and rubbing off already, and a bunch of chits. And the chits, like the counters for the game that represent soldiers and that sort of thing. Having played a couple of other war games, I can say these are very nice compared to most of the ones I've encountered in other games. They're much bigger. They're very easy to read, to see just at a glance what the unit is and what it's supposed to do. So if you're a war gamer coming at this, I think you would say these feel luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
For a standard board game player, I think all told, the components here are they're fine.
They're all fine. It's
Yeah.
all serviceable. Nothing's like particularly nice. Yeah, it's all fine.
Yeah, and I don't want to harp on this too much, right? Because some of this is just that the quality of production for non-war game board games has just gone up and up and up over the years. So now, even like if we review a Fantasy Flight game, it's like, well, these are pretty standard Fantasy Flight components, right? They're nice components.
Yeah.
They're really nice. It's just that we've gotten used to more and more luxurious components over the years, especially with the advent of Kickstarter, because that's made possible some really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is take this with a grain of salt, but I think the components are fine. If you're a war gamer, you'll probably think they're especially good. This is my first experience with DVG games, and I don't know what they're usually like. I assume this is pretty standard fare for them. Overall, I was pretty impressed. The box is a nice slim box, but still sturdy. It doesn't take up more space than it needs to or anything like that, which I very much appreciate. So components for this game are good. The rules for the game, I also found to be very approachable.
Yeah, I thought everything was pretty understandable. It was pretty easy to get through. I was like really surprised, I think, at how quickly I got through the rules. And the rule book's not necessarily small, but I will say it's kind of big text and it doesn't take long to get through it.
No, and lots of examples and lots of, I don't know, I thought the rules were very clear and not particularly long either.
Right.
I wouldn't call it a short rule book, but it's, compared with a standard war game rule book, this is nothing. This is bare bones simple and approachable compared to that. Most of the GMT rule books I've read, and I know a lot of people really like them, I hate them. They read like technical manuals, which makes them easy to reference later, but difficult to learn the first time, at least for me. Even using their little example of play guide or whatever they often include in the box now. So for me, this is much more akin to a typical board game rule book, and I like it for that. So if you're scared of war games, and I generally am, I think this makes it a very easy place to start. And you're not going to find a lot of complicated rules for, troop movement or line of sight or any of that kind of stuff. And those are the kind of things where, like line of sight in particular, in my mind, is one of those aspects of games that can become overcomplicated very quickly. In a lot of games, whether war game or not, if you're playing at a tactical level, you need to draw a straight line from the middle of one hex to the middle of another, right? And even though that sounds clear, it's not always clear if you're measuring it correctly, and you have to look up, like, do trees count against that, or do crates count against that, or other things that might be scattered around the map. So that quickly adds in several paragraphs of text. That sort of thing is trimmed down here in a way that makes this a great entry level kind of war game experience. And yet, when it comes to playing the game, it doesn't feel like the fun or the interesting decisions have been stripped out of this at all.
No, not at all.
There's still quite a bit going on here. So the basic idea of the game is every round there are going to be troops that are moving along these paths all around the castle toward the castle. They're trying to storm this castle and to kill the people who are inside. It's your job to stay in there and to fight them off until this pretty thick deck of SS cards runs out.
Oh, yeah.
If you sit and think about that for too long at the beginning of the game, it gets very disheartening. But that's the idea of the game. This is essentially a tower defense game. I think he actually calls this series of games the Valiant Defense series, which makes perfect sense. Basically, you're going to be putting out different troops or units who are actually present in this castle onto the board and using them to take actions to try to fight off these German soldiers who are advancing. And you're not trying to eradicate them, because I don't believe that's even possible. You're just trying to hold them at bay long enough to win. And the way that works is at the beginning of the game, you're going to lay out all of the units that you will have available to you in front of you. You get to put out a few of them each turn and take an action with them when you put them out. And when you take that action, then you exhaust that character. Your actions are going to vary depending on what character you're playing with, but generally your two main ones are going to be attack and suppress. So when you attack, you're actually trying to attack units that are visible on the board. And the way combat works in this game is you roll dice. The little chit for the unit you're using will tell you how many dice you're supposed to roll, and you want to roll equal to or higher than their defense value. And so you'll have some units that have a defense value of 2, and you'll have a few that have a defense value of 5, right? Which is awful because these are D6s, so the chances of killing those guys are pretty low. So you can do that. You can try to fight off these guys that are already on the board to keep them from advancing toward the castle as more come out. But really, if you're playing smart and you're able to do so, you really want to suppress instead, which, as I imagine it, is basically like firing at the tree line to make people afraid to come out in the first place.
Yeah, just firing blindly.
Yeah, when you do that, then you can put out these suppression tokens that match different colored spaces where more soldiers will come out in the future. And that gives you a higher chance of preventing them coming onto the board in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the key decisions and like points of tension for you on every turn is going to be, do I use this unit to attack, or do I use them to try to prevent future invasions? Because seeing units on the board coming at you is very unnerving.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things, too, that is more efficient to suppress than just attack, which is like, well, can I hold off dealing with these approaching soldiers and just try to, like, worry about what's coming in the future? But yeah, just seeing them advance, and also just the way it works as far as soldiers are come out is determined by a dice roll. And so as they start approaching, you can just get unlucky. I rolled 4 3 times in a row with 2 D6s 3 times. And it feels bad. It feels very bad. Just this row of soldiers marching towards your castle.
Yeah. When it's time to put out more soldiers on the board, more German soldiers. Yeah. The unfortunate thing is you're going to draw a card to see what kind of soldier comes out. Or there are other things that can happen too, but often it's more units on the board. And you're going to roll these dice to see where they're placed. And, you know, obviously the 6, 7, and 8 are going to be rolled more often in theory than some of the low end numbers. And so you may only have like 3 or 4 spots on the board that can shoot at this particular path that the soldiers are following. And you might think to yourself, like, it looks okay right now. And it's a 4, right? So probably more aren't going to come out. I'll worry about that area later. And so you might divert your attention elsewhere because there are other areas that you're just sure need your attention more. Then when it's time to put out more of these soldiers, man, you're really wishing that you had attacked. So that whole system, like attacking, suppressing, and trying to guess where soldiers are going to come out is great. Because basically, each of these different sort of spawn points on the board, as more soldiers come out, they push the existing soldiers closer toward the castle. And so you really want to be on top of trying to prevent them from coming onto the board in the first place with suppression, and then also trying to interrupt their little chain where they would push people along. And it's stress-inducing. The suppression system I particularly like, though, because instead of actually firing at an enemy, you're basically storing up future shots.
Right.
So you put these little tokens over on a space on the board that's color corresponds to other spaces where enemies will come out. And as enemies will be spawned out onto the board, then you decide how many of these suppression tokens am I going to spend to try to prevent this guy coming on the board. And that's an awful feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are precious and you don't want to spend more than you absolutely need to. But for each one that you remove, you get to roll a die. And you are essentially just attacking the way that you would normally attack. But you want more chances of rolling the numbers you need to, right? Mm-hmm. So you'll almost always try to get more than you think you would need. It feels like you're playing it safe when you do that because you're getting a higher chance of rolling what you want, but you're actually playing kind of risky in another way because on future turns, you're not going to have those tokens available.
Right. And they just keep coming.
Oh man, they just keep coming forever and ever, and it's awful. That core system, I think, is really good. That's the bulk of what you'll be doing in terms of your actions. But depending on the kind of unit that you're using, they may have other special abilities as well. So for instance, a few of these soldiers under your command are able to operate a tank. And I guess at this castle, as it was being besieged, there happened to be a tank there called the Besotted Jenny. And you can send some of these soldiers out to man the tank. And that will do tremendous damage to the soldiers coming in, especially with suppression. You can lay down like 6 of these suppression tokens at once.
Yeah, it feels awesome.
Oh, it feels so good. But over time, it's going to get hit by German soldiers. And when its defense goes all the way down, then you've lost this incredibly powerful piece of equipment. And you're just relying on your rifles at that point. And so like that whole system feels amazing. That's a nice addition, having some soldiers who can operate this tank.
That's really cool. And it's also just like, it's a really powerful kind of forward point to defend, but it is pretty much inevitably going to fall.
Yeah, it did in all of my games.
Right. And so it's that, I mean, I say inevitably because I can't imagine where it wouldn't. But yeah, it's the whole idea of like, okay, well, this is a good front line, but you're going to have to fall back at some point. And I mean, if you don't fall back, all your people can just die in the tank. But, you know, it's just a good tension. It's really cool to have that.
Yeah, that feels really nice. And it's also cool that like, so some of the spots in the tank, your soldiers can do a lot of damage in that particular spot. Like they're manning a gun, a mounted machine gun or something, or they're actually firing the cannon on the tank. But in order to use that cannon piece, somebody else has to load it. They have to use their whole action just to load the thing. To me, all of that feels really thematic and cool. And you feel this tension of like, oh man, we really need to be firing this thing right now. But Jerry over here needs to put the bullet in it, right? Put the big bullet in. I don't know the technical term.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, like, and you can have the tank fully manned, or you can have, you know, like a more of a skeleton crew in there and have people swapping positions to load around a shell into the main cannon. Another person can fire it off. It's really cool.
Yeah, I really like that they have a group of people who are dedicated to that, who are super powerful, but you'll probably lose or at least have to have retreat at some point. That feels great. It also gives you a false sense of security, I think, because the tank is able to hit the spawn points in that 6, 7, 8 range as far as like when you roll the dice to determine where the enemy soldiers are going to come out. It's great that they can do that because that's where you're going to have the most people coming in. But when it's gone, I mean, that's a terrifying thought.
Right. You really feel like your back's pressed against the wall.
Yeah. And so I think it does a good job of capturing that feel that probably they must have felt, right? I mean, it's war, so probably you feel that way a lot of the time, I would imagine. But yeah, I thought that was fantastic. Other cool thematic touches with the special abilities of the different units. So there are some men in the crew who have low morale. And if someone else is killed in the same room as them, they die also. You can figure that one out thematically if you'd like. I don't know if they lose heart or they kill themselves or what. But that's a really interesting consideration. It's even more interesting because if they're in the same room as an officer, then that officer prevents them from being lost when someone else dies. So it's like you can imagine those different scenes in war movies where someone dies and one of the other soldiers is freaking out. The commander has that moment where they basically have to slap him across the face to make him come to their senses, right? That's sort of the feeling I get when I play this.
Yeah.
And that's such a neat touch.
Right. Like having that, and then some of the abilities, the characters, they're the French POWs, which most of them were like VIPs and whatnot. But anyway, just actions they actually took during this time, like someone escaping to find more allied troops to come help this besieged castle. It's an awesome way to like tie the history with these special abilities that you have.
Oh yeah, that's probably my favorite thing about this game is there's this one part of the castle that's like a cellar, basically, where all of these French POWs that you've come to set free have been hiding. And if you can get them out of the cellar and up into the main part of the castle, which is hard to do because it takes several actions to get them out and moved around. You know, they can't fight, but just their presence emboldens the people around them. Other soldiers around them roll more dice when they're shooting at the Germans, which is fascinating, right? I love that idea that them seeing like the fruits of their work, why they came in the first place, makes them perform better. And then, yeah, like this one unit who has the special escape action. Apparently, historically, there was a professional tennis player who was one of the POWs, and he was able to escape to a nearby town to get help. So yeah, if you can clear a path of all the soldiers that are like within his line of sight, basically, you can use an action to make him bolt and go and run for help. And what I love about this is not only is that what this guy did in real life, but mechanically, that means that you're shortening the game. you insert this card into the SS deck, and you may not have to go all the way through the deck in order to win. But you have to get that guy to escape early in the game, or else it's not going to work. I mean, how cool is that?
It's great. It's awesome.
That is so, so good. I love that to no end. So like a lot of the touches mechanically that are interesting because they're so closely connected to the theme. Now, what gave me trouble mechanically in this game, and I think this is the same for you too, is that at the beginning of the game, you're taking all of your units that you have and putting them on the board and taking an action with them and exhausting them. They require you to put on these new units before you can start using the units you've already put onto the board, which is cool because at the beginning of the game, then that makes you feel like you're doing quite a bit, right? To suppress, and you're kind of building up a bank of suppression tokens, and you're in a pretty good spot by the time you get everybody out on the board. But then everybody's exhausted. That's tricky because in order to use one of your tokens again, you have to take a whole action to unexhaust a character. So in a game where you're only taking a few different actions on your turn, just unexhausting people is not exciting.
It is a huge swing in pace. And
yeah.
And it's a kind of a continue of do some things, try to unexhaust. It doesn't feel near as good as it does in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think thematically that does make sense, right? Like you may be more emboldened at the beginning of a battle and feel like you're really making some headway, but this is 12 hours that these guys were trapped here, right? At some point, exhaustion sets in and you have to really work to do more to keep fighting and keep an eye out on the tree line or whatever. So thematically, I get it, but mechanically, it feels really punishing.
Yes.
And it feels like a hard shift.
Yes.
Even like some of the characters in here, their special ability is that they can they can take an action to unexhaust 3 other characters, which is great. But even those unexhausted characters you can't use in the same round that they were unexhausted. And man, it feels like the pace of the game just almost grinds to a halt there in the middle. You can get to a point then after that where you are kind of finding a balance between unexhausting characters and using characters. So you're doing a little bit of both every turn. And I assume that's kind of the ideal way to play. But I did not know that in my first game, and I just really struggled to make any headway at all. But even beyond that first game, when I kind of thought maybe this is the way I should go, it still just feels very constricting because you're basically getting the number of moves that each you can do cut in half.
Right.
Or at least the number of moves that feel like you're affecting any change on the board.
Right.
Whew, is brutal. And then the other thing is like moving characters and taking actions, because that exhaustion system works the way that it does, moving those POWs out of the cellar, for instance, and putting them into the house and then moving them to other parts of the house takes forever. So for instance, if you're in a room and you want to move to the other side of the room to shoot out the window on the other side to kill a particular soldier, that's a free action. As long as both characters are unexhausted, you can just swap with them and fire in the same turn. But if you want to move to a different room in the house, that takes your whole action. So to move out of the cellar to another part of the house means you take the POW's turn, you move him upstairs, and he's exhausted. You can, on a future turn, unexhaust him, and then he can move to another room of the house, and he is exhausted, and then he can act after he's unexhausted again. Like, it's just, there are several steps to accomplish what feels like a very simple thing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that I like games where it feels like my turn is able to affect a lot of change on the board.
I mean, I think my just intuition, and maybe I think it probably just comes down to personal preference, but I feel like you could have modified the difficulty in other ways to where you wouldn't have to have this constantly trying to like unexhaust everything. It's just not very fun to me. It's just a change of pace that feels punishing, like you said.
It wouldn't bother me as much, except that the game becomes about managing exhaustion. It's less about tower defense and more about managing exhaustion, or at least like half and half. That's the way it feels to me. Then not only are more soldiers going to come out, but also the Germans will start firing artillery that will degrade the defense values of the buildings that you're holed up in or of the tank. And as that happens, you're more vulnerable to being disrupted. So disruption is a thing that can happen where basically all your units in a particular room are going to have to roll to see if they're disrupted. And if they are, they get a token on them that they have to take an action to remove before they can act. So if you've got somebody who is ready to go, ready to fire a rifle. If they're disrupted because a shell hits the building, you're just going to have to use your next turn instead to take that off, which is fine, right? Like the nerves of your soldiers need to be shot somehow. But if you've got an unexhausted soldier who then becomes disrupted, you've got to take 2 separate actions in order to get them back into fighting shape. And at that point, it feels like, well, why bother? And the reason why you need to bother is if you don't, the next time they become disrupted, they just die. So all that to say, I mean, it's a tower defense game, so it's meant to be punishing. That's the way tower defense works. Waves of bad things come at you and you just try to hold them at bay. But you just need to know that going in, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that did not feel great to me, trying to manage the exhaustion thing and all that. That's not my favorite part of this game. What this game does do really well is create this connection between you and the characters on the board. I cannot think of another game that I have played where I was actually invested in the characters and their stories in the way that I was in this one.
I mean, it is nice because there's a couple of generic, defender tokens as far as just like soldier or rifleman or something like that. But most of them are named for the people that were in it. And it'll have a picture if it's a real person. And then also it'll just have like their flag on there. So it really does. It's just like, okay, this is the American. He's going here to do this.
There's something mechanically about this game, like the special abilities of the soldiers and the way that they are actually a part of the game and a part of your survival and you trying to meet your win conditions. And the way that those intersect with their real human stories, I found to be very compelling. So like, for instance, there is one soldier in the game whose special ability printed on his chit is that if somebody dies in the room where he is, he dies instead. That's mechanically an inefficient use of rules. To create rules for one character out of all the different ones that are on the board, to have this one unique ability is not an efficient use of rules at all. But thematically and emotionally, what that accomplishes is so profound, I think, because in real life, apparently, this guy did take a bullet for someone else and died. If that happens in game, he's going to do it because it's part of his character. It makes me look at this board that's full of chits, and I feel like I know this guy's personality. And that's made even more apparent, I think, by the fact that these chits have statistics and things that you need to know about the characters and, how good they are at attacking or whatever. But they also, where possible, have included the actual photographs of the character that they're portraying. And it includes their name. Like some of them are just generic riflemen, but then you've got Petrovic. And it makes this game not a game about a battle and about the tactical maneuvers that were taken during this battle, but instead makes it a game about human beings who were stuck in this incredible situation and who managed to survive it. I don't know. To me, that's one of the most compelling things I've experienced in a board game to date.
Yeah, the way it's historically grounded in such a small and kind of intimate battle.
Yeah, the setting, the small, intimate setting made me care about what was happening much more. I mean, some designers like to work on kind of the macro level of a war. They like to show you major troop movements and that sort of thing. And then that goes all the way down to kind of squad level tactical experiences where you're reenacting a specific battle. This is definitely more on that latter end. But even those other games, I can't imagine that they managed to affect the same kind of emotional impact. The choice to include names and photographs where possible was an amazing choice. The choice to match up special abilities to the abilities of their real life counterparts was an amazing choice. Mechanically, there's stuff going on in this game that, like the exhaustion thing is not my favorite. The amount of luck in the game is pretty extreme. You can sometimes pull 4 suppression tokens off the board trying to prevent a unit coming on, and you won't roll anything that you need. And that feels really bad.
Yeah, it does.
But I think it's worth asking yourself, what are you looking for in a game? What kind of experience are you hoping to get out of a war game? Are you wanting a historical simulation that reenacts all the events exactly as they happened and you get to experience that? Are you wanting to play a game that just happens to be war themed? If you want something between those two, then that's what this is. It has the emotional impact and weight of a simulation that has remembered the human element, but also it's a tower defense game and a pretty good one, even if it's a swingy game. So I think that's probably enough said about that for now. We could probably just move right into the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. For me, the number one thing under the good section, this feels emotionally impactful and really drew me in and immersed me in the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The theme is there in a really good way. games that deal at the bigger level that are war games, I mean, you can come up with a narrative, but like you said, there's not necessarily the human element of it, of like thinking of individuals per se, and this gets that really well. And yeah, I don't know, knowing that there's a real world connection, it really is nice and it pulls you in.
I guess the difference to me is like the difference between Twilight Struggle and this. Like to me, Twilight Struggle is a phenomenally thematic game.
Yes.
Every card in there being associated with a real world event and, you know, shifting this kind of tug of war between major world powers feels incredibly thematic. And it still generates stories afterward. Like I will not forget that game that we played where we caused nuclear war because I hosted the Olympics. Mm-hmm. You know, it creates great moments. But this game goes beyond being thematic and becomes empathetic. And that's truly fantastic. And I just think another good thing about this game is that while it also does that, it's also a great entry-level war game experience.
Right. And I know we didn't talk about the line of sight system really, but yeah, it's very simplistic, but like satisfying. And I think the way it works with the different kind of rooms or sections of this castle your troops are in and how that overlaps with what kind of fields that they have that they can attack is really interesting and satisfying. It's not overly complicated, but it's plenty of depth there.
Yeah, mechanically, that's one of my favorite things in the game, actually. And one of the things that I would mention here that makes this a great entry-level war game. When you've got a soldier, he's got a little square in one of the rooms in the castle, and that square is going to have a color, maybe 2 colors in some cases. And I know that if my rifleman is on a green square, he can hit every German who is on one of those advancing paths that is on a green square. That's it. So dead simple. If you're on a green square, you can hit the guys on green squares outside the castle. Mm-hmm. To me, that it just strips away some of that stuff that keeps people from experiencing a war game typically and does a really good job of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not having to worry about cover or modifiers or anything like that. It's just, okay, they're there, I can hit them, or like I need to move someone to a room or a spot where they can fire at, oncoming enemies.
Yeah, then that means that the rule book is short. There aren't a bajillion different kinds of chits and components in here. There are several, but they're much more easily manageable than other games of this type, I think. I don't know. It's just, if you have always been interested in learning more about history or a particular battle or whatever, and have always felt like, but I don't want to get through a 40-page rulebook, this is the place to start. And that's a great thing about it. I also think that the decisions that this game forces you into with regard to like how many of these suppression tokens do I pull, and do I attack or do I suppress, or is now the time to load this tank or unexhaust this guy, even though the exhaustion system is not my favorite. All of those decisions are press your luck oriented in a way that makes them feel very tense.
Yes, absolutely. I love the tension between like attacking or suppression or using your suppression tokens yet. All of that feels really good.
Yeah. I don't know if we made this explicit in any of our reviews up to this point, but we decided back when we first started the show to try to focus more on how a game feels and less about giving you a tutorial for how to play, right? Partly because audio is not a great medium for that. And also because there are so many how to play and run through kind of videos online. We wanted to focus on analysis and evaluation of a game, but beyond just, are the mechanics good? What kind of feeling does it create in you? Is it the kind of feeling that makes you immersed? Does it make you want to get the game off the shelf? And this game just made me feel very on edge and very tense in a good way. I feel like I have a stronger connection to those guys in the castle because I also feel a lot of tension trying to decide where to shoot next. And that to me works really well.
Right. Yeah. I would say thematically, the feelings that it gave me were what I expected, just the plight of this and how like kind of crazy and weird of a situation this was.
Yeah. And the mechanics enhance that.
Absolutely.
And even like the die rolling mechanics for trying to decide combat resolution, while that's not always very satisfying, you kind of imagine if you're a guy who's nerve-wracked in a castle window trying to shoot out at the tree line, skill is not the only factor at play in whether you shoot that guy. Right? It's not deterministic. Real-world combat is not. And so even that choice, I think, roll of the die just adds more drama to the experience. So the game is all about pushing the drama element.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, that does create some things about the game that are not so good for me. So some things that I would consider bad about this game for my taste: the luck element is a big deal. If you don't like games with a lot of luck, this one has a ton. Not just in combat resolution, but maybe more importantly in where the units come out.
Yeah.
to me, you just have to know that going in. If you don't mind a lot of luck, that's fine. It can sometimes feel very punishing, though. Also, I would think replayability-wise, there's a lot of variability in the order that the cards come out. There's also additional kind of variants that the rulebook adds for keeping the game spicy. But the games that I've played all felt a little samey from game to game. The cards coming out does change quite a bit about how you react to the game system and all of that. But overall, the game's major movements are going to feel the same. You're going to end up, I think, trying to put soldiers in pretty much the same spot from game to game that you did before, or at least I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I also lost every game of this I played, so take that with a grain of salt. But I found myself easily slipping into that. Right.
And I would say that while I never did any of the variants, I know that they would change things somewhat. It seems like it mostly just increases the difficulty than giving like a radically different experience.
Yeah, I do not need that at this point. I could foresee a time maybe if I played this a lot where I would want to introduce that, but I got spanked pretty hard every time that I played this. Not in a way that felt unfair or unwinnable necessarily, but just like I'm not going to grow as a player into needing a higher difficulty setting for some time.
Right.
So I could see this feeling a little samey if you played it all the time. So just keep that in mind. And also, I mean, another bad thing for me is just for some people, that exhaustion system is going to feel too constricting. To me, the biggest problem with it is the hard shift in the middle.
Yeah, that feels weird. I think I would just almost rather have less actions than have to deal with the exhausting and unexhausting of the soldiers.
Yeah, it feels worse, I think, than having fewer actions.
Right, yeah.
But, for some people, I don't think that's going to be a big deal. For me, it did feel like I have all this freedom and all this ability to, I can't do anything.
Right.
So just something to keep in mind. As for things that are ugly about the game, maybe the only thing I would say is I wish the box was slightly deeper. It'd be a little easier to store the components in like a tray. As it is, I think it's nice that it's so slim and fits on my shelf, but I can't quite figure out a system for storing the chits in an organized way that fits in the box and gets the lid closed. That won't be ugly for most people, but I despise lid lift on boxes. Boxes are just one of my things that I'm obsessive compulsive about. So that's whatever.
Yep.
But that's the only thing I would say is ugly about this game.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all. Nothing's ugly for me. I feel like the main bad thing for me was just the exhaustion system. I just don't like the way it feels. I'd rather a different solution for just kind of limiting or, increasing the tension or difficulty.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that doesn't quite make it to the ugly category for me, but it's pretty close, I would say.
Yeah.
But all that said, then, it's time to talk about the final evaluation for this game and whether it is a game that gets the stomp. For people who are new to this show, the Stomp of Approval is an award that we rarely give out to games. It's an award that we give to games that we both really love and that we would recommend even if you only ever played it solo. And I'm not sure how you feel about this, Carter, but for me, even with all this game's faults, I just love it. I think it is endlessly fascinating. After I played this game, I went online and watched like 4 or 5 videos about this particular battle. And that's just not the sort of thing I typically do. I'm interested in history, but there's something about this game and about the way that the designer, David Thompson, brought it to life that I found incredibly compelling. Not just the way that he, connected you to that human element, that emotional element that I mentioned before, but also just that this is a bizarro event. Right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
He's bringing to life the kind of story that I'd never heard of Castle Itter. And it is a really compelling story. The kind that I'm kind of like, how on earth did I never hear before that German and American soldiers fought together in World War II? He's done a great thing, I think, by basically just uncovering this piece of history for people that most people will never have heard of. And he made me interested in it. And actually, I went online and watched these videos. And as I saw people come up in the videos, I thought, I know that person and I know what their ability is. And before you tell me, I know that this tennis player tried to escape.
Right.
Yeah. Like, that's really cool. And on top of that, it's also a fun, really tense tower defense game. And it's not without its faults, or at least faults for my taste, right? But it's really, really good. And I love it. It seems designed to be better solo than with other people. Like, there's nothing about this game felt at all like it was shoehorned in for solo play or anything like that. It's the rules are crafted in such a way that they assume solo play. And yeah, I just found it to be incredibly compelling.
I think the game is very good. I think it is a great entry, like you've said, for kind of like into like a more wargaming type thing, but just a little bit more simplified, streamlined in ways. But it's not stomp worthy for me, in just that I don't love it, but I still think it's a great game, and I like completely understand why you like it, as much as you do.
Yeah, this is definitely a huge surprise game for me. I was really, really pleased with this. And, David Thompson, I'm intrigued to try more of his games, because the thing is, he doesn't just create war games. He made a game called Orc Olympics, which I don't know anything about, but I was trying to see what else he designed. And, lo and behold, there's a game about orcs. And, he's also done a deck building kind of entry. I don't even know if you call it a war game, a deck building game with a war theme. Family level or family level plus, maybe, called Undaunted Normandy, that's gotten a lot of attention in the last year or so. And then he also did a game called War Chest, about moving these poker chips around a map in kind of an abstract arena battle kind of thing. He's just a very diverse designer, and I feel like that's part of what makes this game feel so approachable. But because he's done this the way that he has, and because of his design background, I'm just really intrigued to play more of his stuff. And looking at the other games he's designed, like he has a game called Pavlov's House, which is a part of the same Defense series. It tells another one of those weird side stories about soldiers defending an apartment building, or he's got one coming out called Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms, about the first day of World War II when these Polish soldiers defended a post office. He has accomplished something impressive by making me want to play more war games. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
I would imagine that he's probably pleased with that. That's probably part of his goal. So this is not a game that's going to get the stomp, because it doesn't get that from both of us. But this is different. It's different and interesting. And even if you're typically scared off from war games, I think you should give this a look. That's all we've got for this episode, folks. If you have not yet checked out other shows in the Dice Tower network, you should. There's a whole network of shows that cover board games from all different angles, and you can find out more about those on dicetower.com. If you haven't yet followed us on Facebook or Instagram, you can go there to find some pretty mediocre pictures of the games that we are receiving or playing, and you can make comments and make suggestions for the show by going there. You can also email us at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com if you have thoughts about the show that you want to share with us. One last thing I'll mention on this episode today: if you are looking for a game to play in your quarantine and you are getting bored and you want to try something else out, I've already plugged them once on this episode. But for real, check out StoneValleyGames.com. Now is not really a good time to be buying from Amazon. Not that any time ever really is, but right now in particular, small businesses need all the help they can get. If you're thinking about getting a game, you can't go down to your friendly local game store because they're closed for health reasons. Try giving Stone Valley Games a shot. They've been good to this show, and they're really good to buy from. And bonus, they carry Castle Itter, so if this sounds like a game that you might want to get, you can get it from them. All right, that's all we've got for this episode, folks. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.